How are y'all doing? Y'all doing well? Things good? It's nice to be back on old Rocky Top, Tennessee. I'm gonna kick it off in a little bit. There's one bit of housekeeping that I'm gonna do. I am on the Twitters, and if y'all follow me on the Twitters and have a question that you would like to pose to Ms. Gambino, I will, if it's not dumb, pose it to her. So y'all should holler at me. My Twitter handle is not that tricky. It's at J Schieber, my last name, S-H-I-E-B-E-R. And I'm gonna watch my notifications pour in as y'all start following me. But if y'all do have questions, feel free. I got a lot of heat last year for using y'all, so I'm gonna just say I come by it naturally. I was raised in Baton Rouge, so it's a real y'all. It's not a fake y'all. I'm not putting it on for y'all. But enough about me. Let's hear from Angel. Angel, you have traveled around the world. You've been everywhere, done all sorts of stuff, and you are now back in Detroit. What brought you back to Motor City?
Yeah, I think it's, there were a few factors, and I kind of hummed and hawed about it before I ultimately made the decision. But I think, first and foremost, I'm a mom, and I wanted my son to be around his family. So that was a big part of it. But we also have family in other parts of the world in much warmer locations. So for me, I had been going back and forth to Detroit, ever since I left when I was a teenager. And, during one of my trips, I saw the state of the city that literally made me pull over in my car and cry. And, I saw real devastation and poverty. And so, ultimately, I always thought at some stage I would go back and do something and really just try to contribute to my hometown. I thought it would be much later in my life. And in that moment I thought, no, I can't wait. It can't wait. So, so I tried to kind of go back and forth and contribute in my own way without actually moving back. And then I just thought, you know what? One of the things that will actually help Detroit eclipse its former glory and be a success in urban regeneration is if more people like me decide to really commit and move back. So I decided I was really excited to apply my experience and to bring my kind of global network back to my hometown so that I could, one, contribute and be a part of the story. I think it's going to happen without me, but I wanted to be part of it. It's really inspiring. And then the other part was, in a very commercial pragmatism, you can go to a lot of cities and there are thriving markets like the Valley, but, how big is your impact going to be? Not just, in terms of the difference that you make, but also commercially. There are a lot of really successful entrepreneurs out there. So I thought, you know what? Going back to a market where there's low cost of entry, there's a lot of talent, there's more space, there's affordable space, I thought, you know what, I could probably build a really successful business here.
So that brings me to sort of the thrust of this, which is the role that entrepreneurialism and entrepreneurship plays in the revitalization of communities like Detroit and like Knoxville. When you think about what an entrepreneur needs to be successful in a community, how do you think about it, and how have y'all tried to sort of structure the Detroit ecosystem in a way that can promote sort of entrepreneurial endeavors, entrepreneurial growth, startups?
Well, I think a lot of people, when they think about starting up their own business, and a lot of the discussions around startups often focus on capital and raising finance. Because nobody wants to leave the day job, to making no income, especially, if they're trying to pay rent or a mortgage or whatever. So there's a lot of focus on that, but I would say one of the biggest catalysts or reasons that I think Detroit has got an absolutely incredible momentum right now is because we've had a few very high-profile leaders who have genuinely inspired people believing that they have an opportunity to create stuff on their own. So, I think while that's a soft answer,
Right.
because you really need things like affordable space, you really need things like other talented engineers and designers and a talent pool that you can work with and hopefully hire at affordable, rates, you actually really need to believe it's possible. And I think, whenever you're starting up your own business as an entrepreneur, all that self-doubt and baggage that we carry from, childhood when our parents told us no and whatever it was, the teacher who said we weren't good enough at whatever, we all have that inside of us. And so when you're constantly getting a reinforced message that this is the city of opportunity, then you start believing it, and you start believing that you can carve your own space and create your own opportunity. But I also think that, part of what some of the business leaders have done in the city of Detroit is they've created incentives for their employees to move back downtown. So, in Knoxville, where you had a lot of that westward growth, and now you're starting to see people come back downtown. Same thing's happening in Detroit. The people moved out to the suburbs, and they're now starting to move back. A lot of that has been driven by business leaders saying, we're going to create these benefits and incentives for people to live closer to their employment. The other big aspect is it's kind of becoming, there's almost like a social proof or social pressure in the corporate sense if you are in the burbs as opposed to downtown, which I think is a very good thing, because what it means is a lot of these businesses are now moving back downtown, and these smaller businesses who might have thought that they had to move out to the burbs at some point are now starting up in the city and growing in the city and don't have plans to leave the city.
So corporate shaming in some ways is a good tool
Yeah,
to get people to reinvest in communities. You mentioned corporate shaming. Well, I mentioned corporate shaming, but you talk about the role that corporations play. What role do you see companies from Detroit, like the automakers, what role should or do they have in sort of developing the startup community there when they were such a part of like the utter collapse of that economy? Like, how do people view that? How should they view that?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that the automotive companies have done incredibly well in Detroit, over the course of their history, is they've developed a really, talented skill base, around engineering and logistics. And, if you look at the entire value chain, not just the big automotive companies, there are a lot of, really skilled people in a particular sector. Now, since moving back, I've been a big advocate and proponent of redefining automotive. So, automotive is basically mobility, right? And so that all of the kind of essential ingredients of some of these new mobility businesses that have emerged, like, for example, Uber, there is no reason why that should not have come out of Detroit. Now, part of the reason it wouldn't have come out of Detroit is because everyone has their own car, and we designed a city so that we could intentionally make it difficult for you to not get around without a car. But the logistics, the mobility, the engineering, all of these different aspects which go into creating successful automotive companies is, I think, an opportunity to redefine automotive to encompass smart mobility, which is a huge, huge, huge growth area. I mean, Google's driverless car is made in Detroit. They're under NDA and they can't promote that fact. Google's done a very good job about that. But, if Larry Page hadn't have been in Michigan, maybe he wouldn't have said it needs to be built in Detroit. So I think, they have created almost a comfort class, and also what I'd say probably even more important is that when the city was so dependent on the automotive sector and creating almost a comfort class, in the wake of that, what they also created is a very conservative culture to business, right? People wanted their homes and their mortgages and a yard and all of that kind of stuff, and we all want our own, great space and space to live. But there's a real conservatism or a real risk aversion that still exists there. And so I think in some ways maybe we were fortunate that we had some collapse in the automotive industry, because people started to say, oh, well, that safe job is no longer safe. So maybe I can actually go start up this other company.
I think that's an interesting point. That's one of the things that I think about too when I think about how ecosystems develop is this notion that you want the corporate enterprises upon which an economy has been traditionally based to be involved, but not smothered, right? And there's a risk with corporate involvement that they're so focused on incrementalism. We talked about this a little bit last night. There's this focus on incrementalism and incremental improvements that happen when you try and base a business off of what has been traditionally successful, that you sort of miss the bigger opportunity to think beyond that industry, right? And so that sort of comes into play. I'm sorry, I'm pontificating, and I will stop and ask you another question. So when you think about, there was an excellent question that was posed from the audience about the role that sort of 3D printing will play in automotive, and I'm wondering if you see, you talk about thinking beyond mobility. Is there a way to think beyond manufacturing, and what sort of technologies are y'all looking at to get there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I went over to MDF today, and, and I know Jay over from Local Motors, and I, hugely inspired by what's happening in that space. And and they're going to do one of the biggest acquisitions in U.S. history pretty soon here. So I think when I partner with large corporations, I guess my pitch to them is, look, you need to focus on your core operating business, and really you don't have the culture or the expertise that some of these digital startups, some of the people that are sitting right out here have. So so don't try to beat them at their own game. Where you're going to, focus on your competition, but where the biggest threats to your business exist are in the lateral or sideways market disruption, which changes, your whole corporate ecosystem. So, so in those scenarios, I work with those big corporates so that I can help them set up entirely separate subsidiaries, which leverage some of their capabilities, but operate in a totally different space, services.
So if corporations are one part of the well, I have a question. How many of y'all graduated from UT? How many of y'all are Vols? I can't really see. How many Vols? How many? Lots of Vols. There are tons of Vols. Yeah, go old Rocky Top. What do you see as the role that universities can and should play in this? Like, are y'all trying to bring in folks from that ecosystem in Michigan to revitalize Detroit, and how does that work? Like, how can people be more involved from the university community, or there's Oak Ridge here, in the research community? Like, how should entrepreneurs think about tapping that?
Absolutely. So I think it's an excellent question, because I think, I don't think it's, too coincidental that, a lot of the great startups are in close proximity to major universities. And, I've started up, businesses on behalf of big corporations, and almost always we choose, cities or locations next to big universities. And, I think part of economic growth or urban revitalization, or even generally startup ecosystems, really have to tap into the existing talent, the people who already live there. A lot of times, especially in the startup community, it's great to tap into younger talent, because when you're younger, you don't know what's not possible, and you have this ego that tells you you could do anything, and you have less to risk. So it's great to develop an ecosystem where you have close proximity to a major university or to even to specialized, colleges, because you've got that talent pool and you've got people who are willing to take some risks early in their career. I also think it's really important, and what we've done in Detroit is we've tried to recruit back talent that we've lost. So, when I was younger and I graduated, I thought I had to move to develop my career.
Screw that. I was not staying in Baton Rouge.
No, exactly, and it was the same in Detroit. I thought it's just not happening.
By the way, I love Baton Rouge. I'm sorry, I just
Yeah.
But, okay, so it wasn't happening.
But if you don't see possibilities for yourself, then you move. So, so I think what we've done a good job at in Detroit, and I think I'm probably a good example of it, a homecoming queen, I decided to move back. And, we started this event 2 years ago, and we call it Homecoming. And what we did is we reached out to, just about everyone we could connect to who had ever lived in Michigan, who was leading a successful business. So, we have, Dick Costello, Larry Page, we have all these huge, names, and we have, other people that we were discovering that we had forgotten about. And that's in the creative industries as well, so musicians, artists, you name it. So we decided to reach out to them and ask them to come back for a series of workshops and events about what's happening in the city and ways that they can support local entrepreneurs. So we had the second one this past year, and it's really just amazing to see the results that are starting to come out of that. We're getting a lot more investment into local businesses and local startups. We're also getting a lot more partnerships, so people that don't necessarily want to go live in Silicon Valley, but they want to be able to leverage the talent of the community in Silicon Valley. So I think there's that category of people that you want to retain. You don't want them to ever leave. And then there's that, talent pool who have gone out into the world and have some success, and you want to get them back. And even if you can't get them to move back, which is the hope, and create incentives and programs to support their move back, then you get them involved in participating in the community. And then, I think you've also got to, to really look at what are the ways to ensure that you're attracting entirely new talent, right? So Detroit is 4 times the size of Paris, and we've got 720,000 people. So it is a very
There's
big
a lot of space.
There's a lot of space.
There's a lot of space for folks.
So we got a lot of space for more people to come. So I think, what we also have to do as an entrepreneurial community is build successful businesses that other people around the world want to come and join. So
when I think about these ecosystems, I think about 3 pillars, right? There's the existing economic base. There's the university system and the creation of a talent pool around that existing economic base that can be leveraged. And then there's government, right? And if you talk about Detroit being empty, like what sorts of things do you expect from your government to provide to encourage that kind of entrepreneurial, the boomerang effect that you did? I mean, you basically like saw your city in ruins and were like, my God, I'm coming back. But is there a role that government could play or should this be driven entirely by the entrepreneurial ecosystem itself?
Well, I'd say a government not going bankrupt is a start, but actually bankruptcy might have been one of the best things to happen for Detroit. So we now actually have funds to reinvest. But I think government has a role, and government's role is to get out of the way as much as possible. And what I mean by that is, it shouldn't take you weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to get permits, to get licenses, to get approvals. So any ways that government can become more efficient to let business owners and consumers interact and transact, and also be safe. So I think the safety factor is really key. I also think that that government's role in providing quality education is really, really important, because that early education, a lot of people don't have to go off and spend $50,000 on university. They can come straight out of high school and start up their own business straight out of high school. Maybe they go to, an educational institution later on, but if they've had a really solid quality education up to the age of 18, then they should be starting companies at that stage. So I think government has a role in creating safety, more opportunities for walkable density, so core infrastructure. I think Internet of Things, both the security aspect, also the opportunities for new applications and services, needs to be high on the agenda for smart mobility and a number of other services that can develop through entrepreneurship. And, but for the most part, I think being as efficient and transparent as possible to allow people to build businesses is the best thing that they can do.
And with that, I think we have to wrap it up. We've run so long right now. One thing I want you all to congratulate yourselves on already for nailing down as part of the tech community is running long and late at an event. That just happens all the time, so y'all are already winning. You've already achieved the goal that every tech community aspires to.
See, and I have one thing for you.
Yeah?
You can't ever do that on a date, by the way. You can't look at your, hand,
Well, I mean, I'm getting valid questions from the audience right now.